Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nataya and this is Aesthetics, where I talk about topics that I care about and you should care about too if you choose. Today I am sharing my unpopular opinions about integration, and this April is the 54th year anniversary of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which illegally prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, or sex. So I'm going to be giving my unpopular opinions about why I feel like this law passing and helping, Black people and everyone equally be able to integrate into neighborhoods, it really didn't do anything for Black people specifically. I'm specifically talking about Black people today. I understand there's other groups that also had struggles through fair housing, but I'm specifically talking about Black people today and how I feel like this law and just integration in general really didn't do anything for Black people, and really I feel like was not the right option. I know that probably sounds pretty radical, like we should be separate, yeah, we're gonna get into that. So first of all, I want to give a background about me a little bit. So I am a master's in urban studies student, and my research interests are on Black autonomy, Black power, Black separatism, Pan-Africanism. So that's where my interest in this topic comes from. And last semester I did an archival research paper on fair housing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin specifically, and looking at how fair housing laws did not do anything to prevent or change segregation in Milwaukee. So if you don't know, Milwaukee, Wisconsin is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. And for me, I just did not understand why, if a fair housing law was passed in 1968, why is it that Milwaukee and so many other cities such as Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia are still very segregated till this day. So through this paper, I basically came to the conclusion that integration was not the right choice, or it was not the solution, because of white resistance. So we're gonna get into that, and all of my opinions are gonna be backed up by the facts that I found, the research that I found in this paper. So I'm not just saying that integration was not a good option, just saying that I'm actually backing this up with the research and the facts that I did from this paper. And if you don't know what archival research is basically like, let's say that a very famous person like Whitney Houston, for example, passed away, and if she had like journals, if she had written things, in her home, those are archived. So if somebody wanted to preserve those things, put them in a museum or something, those would be archival documents, primary sources, because that is something that came directly from Whitney Houston from when she was living. So if you or someone else is a prominent person, and when you pass away, someone thinks that your journal entries that you write in everyday life, they think it's important to preserve, then that's archival documents, so that people can years later go back in history and look at like, wow, Whitney Houston was doing this when she was 20 years old, So that's what archival research is. So I'll be sharing some of the archival documents that I used and researched during this project. So first I'm going to start off and talk about why I think that, first of all, the Fair Housing Act was not for Black people. So I do want to give a disclaimer that I do believe that the Fair Housing Act was necessary to be passed. It was definitely necessary. I'm not saying that it shouldn't have been passed, but there are definitely a lot of flaws. So the Fair Housing Act was passed on April 11th, 1968, and the Fair Housing Act was passed a week after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination on April 4th, 1968. So the President Lyndon B. Johnson administration, because Dr. King was assassinated, they thought that, wow, we should really pass this law in his honor, because he really wanted this law to be passed, this Fair Housing Act, and we should do this in his honor because he passed, or he was assassinated. And That's the first thing that's wrong, because first of all, like, y'all should have been able to pass this law while this man because that's Dr. King, Malcolm X back there, while this man was alive. Like, clearly y'all was impressed to pass the Fair Housing Act while he was alive. Y'all was just diddling, daddling, twiddling your fingers or whatever. Y'all like, okay, we'll pass it eventually, but now all of a sudden he's assassinated. Like, oh, we want to do this in his honor. Like, y'all should have passed it before. Like, y'all been knew that we needed a fair housing law. People like we've been talking about for years, locally and nationally, about needing a fair housing law. So like I said, I did my research on Milwaukee specifically. A woman named Vel Phillips, who is a very popular civil rights leader here in Milwaukee. She was an alderwoman, the first alderwoman for the Common Council in Milwaukee, and she had been advocating for a fair housing law in Milwaukee specifically since 1962. That's 6 years before the Fair Housing Act was even passed nationally. So people have been talking about a Fair Housing Act, and specifically for Black people, because Black people were the main people who were suffering from discrimination in housing. So I really don't like that. Like, I'm not saying it's performative, but we still see like that kind of performative energy today, where it's like, oh, okay, George Floyd happened, so we're gonna, you know, put a diversity, equity, and inclusion office in our school, or we're gonna hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion person here at our company because of the George Floyd situation, and now we realize that we need to do. No, y'all been realized that y'all were racist, and y'all needed to change things, either in your company or your school or whatever. The Lyndon B. Johnson administration, they been knew. But anyways, that's here nor there. That happened. And as we know, like, Dr. King, yes, he was for equal rights for everyone. Like, you know, he was very adamant about equal rights for everybody, and he wasn't discriminating against anyone. But we also know that Dr. King, he was the leader in the civil rights movement, which was for equal rights for Black people. Okay, other groups of people had their own civil rights movement, but the civil rights movement in particular was for Black people, the one that Dr. King and many other leaders led. So it's like, when you're leading this movement for Black people, you are looking for a law for Black people. Not saying that Dr. King didn't want equal rights for all, but it's like, we were advocating for a law for Black people specifically. And not saying that it's wrong that the Fair Housing Act covers, you know, sex, religion, sexual orientation, all of that, but it's like, we asked for a fair housing law, and then you give us this like law that covers everyone and really doesn't do anything for Black people. And I say that because, like, Black people and the African American plight is very unique to any other group. So there is no other group of people here in America who have been literally taken from their homelands and then brought here and enslaved, and then literally dehumanized, and then eventually freed, and then eventually had to go through Jim Crow, and then are still oppressed today. No group of people has that experience here in America. No other group of people. So if a group of people have that unique experience, we need unique laws and unique remedies to remedy all the damage that has been done. So doing a fair housing law that covers race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., it really does the bare minimum for Black people. So that's why I'm saying that I really feel like the Fair Housing Act really wasn't for Black people. Okay, we need a remedy that's going to remedy all the harm and all the crimes that white people did against us. And that gets more to the argument about reparations, which I do strongly believe that Black people need to have reparations, because it doesn't make sense how white people made so much money commodified black people and didn't pay black people a dime, just worked for free. Maybe, you know, there's still little that there's still not enough that we know about slavery, I should say. I know that, you know, some enslaved Africans may have been, you know, paid certain things or given certain things for their work, but the enslaved, that was majority like work for free, okay? And then dehumanized in the process, not getting the proper nutrition, not getting the proper treatment, none of that. So yeah, and I just want to go to the Ta-Nehisi Coates 2014 reparations article just to emphasize how much enslaved Africans were worth and why I strongly argue that Black Americans deserve reparations, because we literally are owed all of this money. So basically, this is a quote exactly coming from Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, Reparations, and it says, in 1860, slaves as an asset were worth more than all of America's manufacturing, all of the railroads, all of the productive capacity of the United States put together, and slaves were the single largest by far financial asset of property in the entire American economy. So enslaved Africans were worth a lot and gained nothing from it. And the people, the descendants of the enslaved, have earned nothing and are literally still oppressed. So that little fair housing law cannot remedy all those years of slavery and all the suffering that Black people faced and all the money that was literally taken from us and stolen from us. So that's why I say the Fair Housing Act really wasn't for Black people. So now we're gonna move into the aftermath of the Fair Housing Act and why like white resistance, I feel like, is the reason why integration is just not for Black people. So first of all, when the Fair Housing Act was passed, white people did not want Black people moving into their neighborhoods. And one thing about white people, they gonna find a way out of no way to move themselves around a law, okay? They gonna find a way, because basically when Black people tried to move into majority white neighborhoods, either white people rioted or they moved out of the neighborhood, you know, white flight. And I'm going to share some quotes from the research that I did, and even though these quotes are specifically to Milwaukee, just know that these situations and riots and white flight are not specific to Milwaukee. These racist attitudes, these are not specific to Milwaukee. Trust me, this reflects the entire United States. So the United States as a collective, I should say. So one quote from when like Black people, because you know, like with housing segregation was also school segregation, so schools would be segregated as well, since kids usually went to the schools that were closest to their homes. White parents become concerned about the quality of the schools when minority families move into their neighborhood. Then they either transfer their children into another school under the open enrollment policy, or if that's not possible, they sell their homes and move to another school district. Either action results in perpetuation of our segregated school system. So even with schools, if a white parent or a white family thought that too many Black people were in that school, they'd be like, okay, we either gonna move our house or we gonna move our child out to school. And if we can't move the child out to school, we moving, period. And also when Black people would move into neighborhoods, some white people would say they wouldn't mind, but then they would still have those racist attitudes. So this is another example of a resident from Wisconsin saying their opinions about how they felt about Black people possibly moving into their area. I would not care should a colored family buy a home next to mine and thus become my neighbor. There is a qualification to this, however. I would want a guarantee that this colored owner would keep the property in the same good condition that I keep mine, that he not immediately convert the place into a rooming house with a multitude of residents, that he keep his garbage in his cans, that he not disturb the neighborhood with ruckus, laughter at all hours of the night, that he not have family fights which wake up the whole neighborhood. So basically, these are very stereotypical views about black people being loud, black people having a whole bunch of people at their house, black people having fights at their house. Like, it's really giving like you're mad because black people have joy in the midst of all of this oppression. Because you know how like black people, when we laugh, when we joke around and we're funny. When we cackle, we be stumped on the ground, kikiing, like, you know. And I feel like when white people see that, they be like, why do they have so much joy? Like, you can't take black people's joy. As much as we've been through, black boy joy, black girl joy, we still got that. So I feel like that was just giving like you're mad because we still got all of this joy and we still have all of this community. Because you know, black people, yes, they might have like a lot of people come to their house, but like with a lot of black families are important, so they'll have people over at their house, or it's like a community, like that's this safe space. So I just feel like white people with these racist attitudes, basically they was like, if black people go move into our neighborhoods, we have certain requirements, and if black people can't, you know, can't keep all of this to themselves, then they can't move. I don't need them in this neighborhood. And then another quote, it says that the Nigs are rapidly ruining this wonderful nation. Since their bad actions, it is deteriorating until we decent law-abiding citizens wonder where we can move to next. The suburbs aren't really far enough away. If you people won't go back to Africa, maybe we will have to get peace of mind, and most importantly, some degree of safety. As matters are present, our streets are unsafe, even in broad daylight to walk upon, and our schools, since integration of undesirable children, are unsafe also. So basically, like, they're saying that the suburbs aren't far enough. Like, they're trying to get away from black people as far as they can. And it's like, black people keep trying to move into our neighborhoods, and we have to keep moving far and far away to the suburbs, and we don't have anywhere to go. Like, white people was moving. White flight, like they was gone if they saw black people, or if they even heard black people. I don't have this quote in here, but I have read in one of my classes that basically, like, realtors, they would scare white people away. Either this was like basically like if it was a rumor that black people were coming into the neighborhood, whether that rumor was true or false, the realtor would come into the white neighborhood and be like, hey, the niggas are coming, the Negroes are coming, they coming into the neighborhood, sell your house, leave, go to another neighborhood. And that's what they would do. So white people really didn't want to live around black people, and I feel like to this day white people really don't want to live around black people like that. And they do the same thing. If they notice that too many black people are at their kids' school, too many black people moving around their neighborhood, they gonna leave. I really feel like that's how it is to this day, because that's how white people are. And they might not be as expressive like this and explicit as they were before, but trust me, they still got those internalized thoughts in their mind. And even when you go to like suburban neighborhoods or like majority white neighborhoods, as a black person, you know that you get crazy stares from white people, or not even just neighborhoods in general, even like predominantly white institutions, schools. Like, white people will look at you crazy if you are a minority or black person. And that enough for me. If I see a white person looking at me crazy because they feel like I don't belong here, like, you just get that energy, that sense of like them staring at you and like you don't belong here. That's enough for me to not want to be there. Okay, that's enough for me to not want to be in that neighborhood if I feel like white people don't want me there or feel like I don't belong. And then the last thing is white people rioting. And this quote is from it was from before the Fair Housing Act was passed. It was like from 10 years before, but this still happened after the Fair Housing Act was passed, just in different ways. White people rioted, and I feel like we don't talk about white people rioting enough. You know, when white people riot, people see it as acceptable, but when black people riot for actual reasons because of oppression, then black people get criticized and called all type of stuff, but white people just get away with it and get away with everything. But basically, this quote says, in 1957 in San Francisco, even baseball star Willie Mays found it impossible to buy a home in an exclusive all-white section of that city. So Willie Mays was a black baseball star, and that's kind of like, you know, athletes today. Even if you're an athlete, at the end of the day, you're still black. It doesn't matter if you make millions of dollars. You still black at the end of the day. So, in addition, during the late 1940s and 50s, violence against blacks attempting to move into previously all-white neighborhoods became common. Except for Hirsch, few scholars have given much attention to this phenomenon, but physical attacks on black homeowners, which sometimes escalated into small-scale riots, were important in shaping the contours of the new post-war ghettos. So basically, this article is arguing like the formation of the ghettos, basically the formation of like segregated black neighborhoods where black people are concentrated in one area. This is like something that caused the formation of ghettos and black people being concentrated, because white people would run black people out of their neighborhoods and riot if they tried to move into those neighborhoods. So all in all, to me, like, a law is not going to change anything if white people continue to resist and white people continue to have these racist mindsets. And you know, it may seem like we are far removed from these racist mindsets today, but white people are just more sneaky today, I feel like. Oh, if you're white and you're watching this, I do not apologize, but I just feel like white people are more sneaky these days, and they have that internalized racism. You know, they feel like that their ancestors' crimes and evil doings, that they ain't have nothing to do with that. No, that's still internalized. Like, just like black people have trauma, multi-generational trauma from literally slavery and Jim Crow and oppression today, white people got trauma that they need to deal with. Like, if your ancestors, they were part of the KKK, they were racist, they were these white people that were rioting when black people would come into the neighborhoods, like, trust me, that's inside you too. Just like with black people, when we don't really see that trauma, or we feel like we don't see that trauma, or don't see the ways that trauma is in our life, it's there. Even if it might seem dormant, trust me, that multi-generational trauma is there. That does not just go away, because even though we didn't deal with those things, we didn't deal with slavery, we didn't deal with Jim Crow, like our ancestors did, and trust me, that trauma is passed down, because there was no way that they could heal from that, especially, you know, it was just trauma after trauma, and that's how it is today. So with white people definitely need to heal from all that racist and evil doings. Like, that energy still inside y'all. Like, trust me, even if you feel like, oh, I'm not racist, like, trust me, you probably racist. You're most likely racist, white people, okay? Like, I remember one time it was this model, I want to say, it was like years ago, this was when I was in undergrad. It was this model that said that all white people are racist, and she meant that like white people collectively are racist because they benefit from the system. Like, as a collective, like, white people are racist. So I feel like with this, I'm saying that collectively, like, white people are racist. Even if you are working towards anti-racism, you know, you understand, like, everything, you know, you're feeling that white guilt, you probably still racist. So it is what it is. But white people really need to heal. And I feel like white people may never heal from all of that, and black people may never heal from like completely. Like I don't think in general you can really heal from anything completely. Like let's say that I fall down and hurt my knee, like on a bike or something, I fall off, that scar is gonna be there for life. Even when my knee heals, that scar will still be there. I know we all got scars from when we were children and we were scandalous and just, you know, wild and stuff, and you know, just brave. So it's like that scar will forever be there with you. And I feel like with this generational trauma with black people and this trauma with white people, it's still gonna be there regardless. For me, I really feel like no matter how many laws we like pass with white resistance, it's never gonna work. It's never gonna work. And I really feel like white people, they don't want to deal with that guilt. They don't want to deal with, they just want to forget about everything. And it's like, no, you cannot forget about all those years of slavery and Reconstruction and Jim Crow. You cannot forget all of that history. I think white people are really afraid to face that history. I know it's challenging, like even with stuff that I've unintentionally done harm on to people that I love, like it feels bad to actually own up to that, especially if it's unintentional. And like these white people, they ancestors, yeah, they did that, but it's like you still have to own up to it because that's your ancestors, and though your ancestors passed those mentalities and attitudes down to you as well. And I feel like white people will never fully own up to that. So black people, we need to protect ourselves and we need to go our separate ways. I'm sorry, not sorry actually. So that kind of gets into Afro-pessimism. It's a different topic, which I feel like I'm an Afro-pessimist and Ta-Nehisi Coates is an Afro-pessimist, which basically means that I feel that there is no remedy for black and white relations. Like it doesn't matter how much white people go through anti-racist training and they do so much to try to heal. There is no remedy between black and white people trying to integrate. There is never going to be, it's never going to be equal and equity for black people as long as we try to do that. I just don't think it's not gonna work. So that gets into my last argument, which goes into black autonomy and black power. I really feel like black people need to have their own towns, and this is not something that has never been done before. So I didn't know about black towns until 2 years ago, and black towns is the research that I'm doing right now. Black towns were basically all black towns that were created by freed slaves. They purchased the land and they leased the land out to other African Americans to build businesses. They had banks and they had their own governments, municipalities, all of that. It was literally an all black town, and there were hundreds of them, and there are still some to this day. The most black towns are in Oklahoma, or were in Oklahoma. There are still some around that are in Oklahoma. And basically, if you've heard of like the Black Wall Street in Oklahoma or the Tulsa Massacre, even with like black people having their own stuff, white people still came in and rioted. So it's like, not saying that black towns are the ultimate solution, but I really feel like us having our own systems, because we cannot survive, or we can survive in this system, but we cannot excel in this system in the way that black people want to. In order for us to excel, I really feel like we need to have our own towns again. And I know that's like very separatist mindset, but it's like we can't continue to allow white people to put this harm on us and allow us to feel this oppression in this system that we know will never really work for us. So I really feel like we as black people need to have our own separate towns and forget about this whole integration thing. And then to leave y'all off today, I'm gonna end y'all with a Martin Luther King quote to end my argument. The Martin Luther King quote is from a conversation that he was having with Harry Belafonte, and I'm gonna read this, and I'm also gonna put this article in the description box for y'all to read yourselves. So this is long, bear with me. Actor-activist Harry Belafonte shared a similar moment about his friend. Midway through the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. realized that the struggle for integration will ultimately become a struggle for economic rights. Belafonte reflected, "I remember the last time we were together at my home, shortly before he was murdered. He seemed quite agitated and preoccupied, and I asked him what the problem was." According to Belafonte, King responded, "I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know we will win, but I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision that she may have had, and I'm afraid that even as we integrate, we are walking into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to deeply be concerned with the plight of the poor and disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetuate the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house." Belafonte added, "The statement took me aback. It was the last thing I would have expected to hear considering the nature of our struggle." Belafonte said he asked King, "What should we do?" And King replied that we should become the firemen. King said, "Let us not stand by and let the house burn." So for me, like, this quote, the way that I am interpreting this with Dr. King saying that I feel like I'm integrating my people into a burning house, it's that economic oppression, as Dr. King was saying, like, people are not concerned about the poor and the disenfranchised. Economic oppression is the real reason why we are here. And economic oppression goes back into the argument about reparations. Black people will continue to be under white people, like, economically. When I'm talking economically, I'm talking like racial wealth gap. The racial wealth gap between white and black people will continue to widen, and we never gonna be on the same level, because no matter how hard black people try, working class black people, middle class black people, whatever, there is still going to be that wealth gap. Because as I said earlier, how valuable and how much of an asset enslaved Africans were. White people gained all that money while black people had to start at the bottom after they were freed, and then they were still pushed back with laws and still oppressed. So this economic oppression, like, until black people get reparations, and when I say reparations, I don't mean just giving black people money, but giving black people things that are tangible, things that are going to generate generational wealth. You know, give us our 40 acres and a mule plus more. Give us our land so that we can own that land and we can build businesses on top of that land. And I'm not saying that black capitalism is going to save us, but more so of a cooperative economics. With the black towns that I've been researching, a lot of times in that town, and some of the towns that I've been researching, black people would help each other out. It wasn't just like, oh, my business over here, my business over here. My storage on my SD card was full, so I got cut off. But basically, I was saying that cooperative economics, black people actually helping each other out to uplift each other. A lot of these black towns were based on that concept and not just like competing with each other, especially because during this time, a lot of black people, they were freed slaves. So it's like during that time, it's like, yeah, we definitely need to stick together, because who do we have? And I think during this time, it's a little bit harder, or a lot harder, to get black people to come together like that and feel like we only have each other. Because some black people, they're gonna be like, well, I depend on this system here, the white supremacist system, and I believe that it can work for me and my family, so I'm gonna stay here. But other black people won't feel the same. So yeah, that's what Dr. King said, and I definitely feel that we've been integrated into a burning house because we've been burning this whole time. Like it's helped a little bit, but it's like integrating has really done nothing for Black people in my eyes. So I'm gonna end on that note. Let me know your thoughts about my thoughts and my unpopular opinions about integration in the comment section below. If you disagree, that's cool. These are just my opinions, but like I said, I base my opinions on facts. So I'm not just coming on here saying my opinions because I ain't got no facts behind them. I told you all the facts and why I feel this way. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.